All right, so this is the meeting of the Flood and Erosion Control Board. The date is July 21st, and I would like everyone who is a board member to just go around and say their names. This is Becky Bunnell, Chair.
Hey, Don Lamberti.
Don's the Vice Chairman. I'm Dick Mahusky. I'm the Secretary.
Paul Andino.
Oh,
sorry. Peter, go ahead.
Peter Whitwell and Paul Andino, it looks like, just joined in. Do we have any members of the public? Okay, well, let us go ahead and start the meeting. The first item on call is approval of the 6/16 draft minutes. Prue had sent them out, and Prue is on as well. Sorry, go ahead. Prue.
Yes.
So
that would be Prue O'Brien, our recording secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Hi, Paul.
Looks good to me.
Did anyone have any comments on this?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Okay.
Do I hear a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you, Prue. Let's move on to item 2 on call, which is the review of the Flood and Erosion Control Board master plan, as well as our 5-year funding plan. I did not get a chance to get any specific updates from the town on any of our master plan items. I don't know, Dick, if you have any updates.
No, I'm following the lead of my chairperson. I intended to. Once again, I've been calling Brian to get an update on specifically the FEMA response from Washington, which I think is overdue, but maybe they got an extension on their allowable time due to the COVID stuff. I don't know, but for the next meeting, for our August meeting, I fully intend to update the entire project list with the changes that we've been discussing over the past few months.
Okay, thank you for that.
I guess I can give you an update on the wastewater treatment plant project, because that's certainly one of our projects. Again, I attend the meetings last week. No, 2 weeks ago, we had our meeting at the job site, outside under the tent at the job trailer, wearing masks and so forth. They still have not resolved the issue of that large, good production pile driver machine. They have that big machine, and they're still hung up with getting the state to license one of Helical, the people doing the subcontract doing that work. They had a guy take the test a week before the meeting. They had not heard back from the state. It's almost like, we should have heard 5 hours after he completed the test.
Right.
So who's jerking around who on that whole topic is still a suspicious unknown. But nonetheless, they are making progress. If you go by One Rod Highway, you will see that they have sheet pile going from both directions around the wastewater treatment plant proper. There's a gap in the middle, because that gap in the middle has some suspect contaminated soils, and they're waiting for guidance on DEEP as to what they have to do. Again, this project, due to the visibility that our town has with DEEP and the contaminated fill on various athletic fields and stuff, they're being overly cautious. They're dotting each I twice and crossing each T twice before they proceed. In the meantime, they have started driving some piles across the road over near the clarifiers. So they still are making progress. They've been putting in some drain lines, and things are still on schedule. They still feel like they can get enough invoicing in by the September deadline so we maximize our grant reimbursement dollars. There is also some talk about the grant reimbursement deadline being extended by perhaps 90 days due to the whole all things COVID. So we're, progress is not as quick as they expected nor anyone would like, but we're still plugging away at staying on the ultimate schedule.
Sounds good.
Thank you for the update. Dick, not specifically on the project plan, but it sort of has been talked about in conjunction with the project plan. Were you able to ever follow up with Brian Rupp and get the valuations that he had and the
No,
and sort of
I did not follow up with him. I will.
If you could put that on your list, I just feel like having that come from the Army Corps is much stronger than having us try to.
I understand.
All right, so are there any other questions or comments on the master plan? If not, we will plan to discuss that in more detail in August. And I would propose to move on to item 3 on call, which is discussion of Flood and Erosion Control Board proposal for a town charter revision. And Peter, I know that I got you comments, and I believe Dick had gotten you comments. I don't know if Paul or Don had a chance to get comments to you.
Now, I just a half hour ago I sent 2 emails out, and if y'all can look in your inbox, I hope you will see the email. Let's take the one on the charter revision first.
Okay. The organization of the town is the first one. And Flood and Erosion Control Board is second. And then the letter is third. Okay.
All right, so what I did, I took what we have been discussing over these last few months, as I understand it, and I made changes to the actual charter language, and I wrote a draft transmittal letter to the Board of Selectmen. And I also will plan to include with that submittal to the Board of Selectmen, either Peter or Becky, I don't know, it was in the packet, the Part 2 Municipal Flood and Erosion Control Boards, all of the text of the statutes from 2584 through 2594.
Right.
So if you all have, I have this proposal. I'd be happy to walk through it. But if Peter, if you want to make some comments first or something, please do.
Okay. Allow me to make just a few comments. And as a start, Dick, I like the way that you have simplified the language. I'm largely in agreement with what you've provided us with, but a few comments and a few questions. The town charter 1.4, organization of town government, I
have to amend that because I misread that, and I thought that where there's a break in the left-hand column of numerals and it has the word alternates, I thought that was a listing of alternates for the Human Services Commission and the Golf Commission. But then I realized that was the alternates for appearing right below and for the Historic District Commission. So where I'm putting in 3 Flood and Erosion Control Board alternates, that has to move up to right below Flood and Erosion Control Board, with the now 7 members in 5-year terms.
Okay, agreed. So we covered that one exactly. Then looking here, 10.12. Again, Dick, I like your having simplified it the way you have. with a couple of caveats. You say in C, first A and B, I'm fine with those. C, where you discuss alternates, you simply say the alternate members shall serve as per section 25-84.
Yep.
Now, 25-84 makes reference to a local ordinance. I'm not aware of our having an ordinance. Do we need to address that point? And if need be, ask that there be an ordinance that authorizes the appointment of alternates.
Okay, I don't know what the law says, but in my mind, the provisions of the town charter are the same as an ordinance.
I would probably want to talk to the town attorney on that, because it says any town, city, or borough shall have the power to provide by ordinance for the appointment or election of 3 alternate members. And I understand your rationale. The charter equals an ordinance, but I think just as a matter of housekeeping, we should find out. And
okay, well, but Peter, if you go up to the first section there, about almost 2/3 of the way down, the line starts with selectmen may be empowered by such ordinance. So that would refer back to the first sentence there, any municipality by vote of its legislative body adopt the provisions. So in my mind, ordinance and this whole adoption thing is all one and the same.
so
I'm
you're
assuming that
saying
the charter has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, and doesn't that then become a ordinance once they approve something, or not?
Well, it also goes to the RTM, I believe. I believe it's Board of Selectmen.
Actually, I'm sorry, Selectmen and Board of and RTM, correct? And it's the RTM actually that approves it officially and changes the charter.
Correct. I mean, correct. That's my understanding.
Yeah, Becky.
So, Peter, your point's well taken. When we send this to the Board of Selectmen and they say, "Well, wait a minute, what does this mean?" Then we'll have a chance. When we send this to the Board of Selectmen, the first thing they're going to do is say, "Hey, town attorney, take a look at this." I would bet.
I would suggest that 2 points. Number one, I would suggest in advance of going to the Board of Selectmen that we perhaps ask the town attorney, do we need to take any special steps in order to fall within the parameters of what might qualify as an ordinance? And then number two, my underlying rationale, as we discussed once before, we are asking that the town charter be amended to provide us with the maximum range of authority subject to approval on a case-by-case basis by the appropriate town body. But we're asking for a lot of authority. If so, let's make sure that the foundation is absolutely right and that nobody can challenge our having brought members onto the board in an improper fashion. So I'm just suggesting we just check with, I guess, the town attorney and ask him if he's happy with it. And that would mean that concurrence by the Board of Selectmen or simply based on the authority of the charter would be sufficient.
I just want to get this topic moving, and in my mind, the way to get it moving is to send this to the Board of Selectmen, and if they have questions, comments, or concerns, they will certainly not be bashful to raise them either back to us or seek counsel from the town attorney before they raise them back to us. And before they put it on the agenda, I would bet. I mean, this is still going to take a couple cycles of Board of Selectmen to get on the agenda.
I agree.
So I want to get it going. If you want to change some language in there, Peter, how do you want to change it?
Well, may I suggest, and I will get it done over the next week, that I simply reach out to the town attorney and ask him about the ordinance issue? Or is that opening a black hole of nothingness?
Well,
I mean, I think you can do that.
Once upon a time, in a movie I was watching, I heard an attorney say, "Never ask a question to which you don't know the answer." So I would not ask the question. I would make again. I want to make the next step. This is what I put together as what I think is a reasonable way to make the next step and get this moving.
Dick, I think I agree with you. Just get started and see what happens. I agree.
And we could always, during the course of the overall effort, raise the point and request clarification along the way.
Yes.
I have no problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dick, okay, so it sounds like we're aligned that we're going to comment on Dick's proposed language, and assuming we're willing to approve it either as is or with changes, we would take this to the Board of Selectmen after today's call. So I have some questions on Dick's proposal. I'm unclear what you're proposing in bold in 1.4.
I will, Becky, just one other point on C. Maybe I'm misreading it, but I don't see that there's provision for appointment of alternates. I mean,
that's why I put in there alternate members shall serve as per section 25.84, because 25.84 talks about how when one of the 7 regular members cannot serve, does not show up, disqualifies themselves, then the chair will appoint in a rotating fashion the next.
And Dick,
if a regular, it says such alternate.
I would just put that in. Why? I would delete alternate members may serve as per section 25.84 and just copy this part from 25.84 that deals with alternate members, so that it's clearly laid out in the charter, because no one's going to know and go to 25.84.
Okay, that's fine.
Let's just write the longhand version. Let's just copy the section of 25.84 into this document.
Sure. Becky, I like that idea.
All right, so I will strike. Okay, so I will strike alternate members shall serve as per section 2584, and that will now read alternate members shall have terms of 3 years, which shall be staggered so that not more than one term expires in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Such alternate members shall, when seated as herein provided, have all the powers and duties set forth for such board and its members. I will not include the next line from the statute saying such alternate members shall be electors of such town, city, or borough. because that is already stated up at the beginning of our charter. You have to be an elector in order to be appointed to a board or commission. So that's already covered in the charter. So it'll just then continue with the rest.
I thought that was only for full members.
No, it says any appointed to any board or commission.
Yes. Who's?
No, it
my
applies to any appointment.
My suggestion is you leave it in there, because I think you need to be careful that you don't that a full member does not become synonymous with an alternate. And I think Becky's point is well taken, that we have a state statute that undoubtedly has been interpreted many times. Let's use the language that they have that says they have to be electors. Because you're talking about alternates, not full members, and they are different. I like Becky's idea.
All right, I'll leave it in. So it'll just read everything that's in Section 25-84B, starting with such alternate member shall, when seated, as herein provided, and just include that whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a nice, simple approach, and then as we proceed through discussions with Board of Selectmen or whoever else, I emphasize, I think that it's important that we establish, pursuant to what authority is this being done. And I'm not entirely comfortable with town charter or Board of Selectmen vote equaling ordinance. I don't pretend to be an expert in that area, but that sounds like a pretty broad brush to me.
Okay.
And the last thing we want is to have somebody say that we had no authority to do what we did.
Okay, done. Becky, you had a question on 1.4?
Yeah, I was unclear what you were proposing there. You had mentioned that your added text is in bold, but it looks like you've done a strikeout of Flood and Erosion Control Board 5 and 7.
Right, but that's because we're going to have seven regular members with 5-year terms. And then the next line after that will be what I mistakenly put at the end. The number is three people. The body or position is Flood and Erosion Control Board alternates, and the term is 3 years. So that would be moved up underneath the 7, and it would be alternates. Correct. So it would appear similar to Historic District Commission down below. Right. Exactly. Okay. So Historic District Commission has its line, and then the next line is Historic District Commission alternates. Okay. So you will make those changes then. Yes. And I'm also going to take 4 years on the Human Services Commission and put that in line under term. Mm-hmm. And then I was unclear what change you're proposing for 9.7, Director of Public Works. You had bolded boards and commissions. As it reads now, be chief advisor to the town in all departments except the Board of Education in all matters. So it does not say he's going to be the chief technical advisor of boards and commissions except for the Board of Education. Okay, so I'm just trying to. That. Pardon? They may not agree with that because they might want him to be a technical advisor for all boards and commissions. I'm sorry. Say that again. They may not want him to be him or her, because we don't know who the new director of public works is, to be a chief technical advisor for all boards. We have it called out in the job description of the director of public works that they are supposed to advise Flood and Erosion Control Board, and I think they might have even called out a couple other boards, but I don't believe the job description called out all boards and commissions.
I mean, I don't know that that's not appropriate. I just don't know that it's our role to add it. So,
well, here's what I want to solidify the relationship between Public Works and flood and erosion. That's what I'm trying to do. I mean, it's that's why in the transmittal letter, I'm saying the minor change in section 97B3 regarding the duties of Director of Public Works is to clearly acknowledge their close support of specific boards and commissions, as noted in the currently advertised DPW Director's job description, where it says, quote, attends meetings and serves in an advisory capacity to the Water Pollution Control Authority, Flood and Erosion Board, and Parks and Recreation Commission as requested. Commission. As requested, may provide service to other boards and commissions, including internal and external committees dealing with town-wide policies, programs, and building projects. And then in the charter, they exempt the Board of Education because there's a Chinese firewall between the Board of Education and the rest of the town.
All right, so why don't we attach the job description then maybe to this letter, just saying that?
Well, I read from the cover letter. I was just reading from the cover letter.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, I wasn't looking at the cover letter when we were discussing this. Sorry.
Yeah, that whole thing I read. I quoted from the currently advertised DPW Director's job description.
All right, it's up to the Board of Selectmen if they want to have it be the broader boards and commissions or call out these three. I'm fine on proposing the broader board and commission change for the charter at this point. I'm not going to push it hard, to be honest, because I just want them to be acknowledged as an advisor to Flood and Erosion Control Board, and for our remit, that's all that I think we can specifically request. But because
my follow-on to this, the strategy is that to link him directly per charter to the boards and commissions, because I want to wind up with some kind of line item in the Public Works Department budget for flood and erosion control projects.
Right, but that's not how it's stated. You're saying attends meetings and serves in an advisory capacity. That's not saying Flood and Erosion Control Board therefore gets a line item budget.
No. That's a follow-on. That's a follow-on discussion within the workings of the Public Works Department. I don't think the charter needs to get lost in those weeds.
I agree with you in principle. I'm just not sure that this is going to necessarily solve that issue, but I don't disagree with you that I think flood and erosion should have a line item in the DPW, but this does not necessarily lead to that in my mind. But I don't have an issue with including board and commission in 9.7.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take what it reads now is be chief technical advisor of the town in all departments. Now, do you want to define departments as only departments in the town, or do you want to define departments as including various boards and commissions? I want to define it as including various boards and commissions. And since it says except the Board of Education, it kind of implies that he's doing it for other boards. So I just want to state that. So the bottom line is, Becky, you're thinking of taking it out or expanding it further. I don't want to expand it further because the less verbiage that's changed, I think the more palatable it will be to everyone. And this does what my intention is, to link to link their position to boards and commissions, of which we will be one.
Okay. I mean, I think a stronger way to do that, in my mind, would actually be to call it out as will be an ex officio member of the Flood and Erosion Control Board, the same way they do in item 4, where they say an ex officio member without vote of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission and Park Creation. I think a stronger way.
I can do that because that ran through my mind.
So that basically makes them an ex officio member of our board, which means that he is a technical advisor to our board.
I'll do that.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
So I will add that as item number 5 under the DPW guy. I'll use the exact same language as number 4, except say Flood and Erosion Control Board.
Why wouldn't you just expand number 4 to be Planning and Zoning Commission with respect to planning?
And yeah, okay, there you go. And Flood and Erosion Control. I see. Be an ex officio member without vote of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission with respect to planning, and of the Parks and Recreations Commission, and of the Flood and Erosion Control Board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
That's fine. Yeah, because that ran through my mind, and I didn't know if we wanted to do that. But no, I'm good with that.
All right. So let me ask then, with the changes as outlined, do I have a motion to approve these proposed changes that Dick has outlined with the changes as discussed?
Becky, may I
Yes.
raise one other point for comment?
Yes.
Looking at the cover letter, the paragraph immediately preceding the one that you
Peter,
just discussed.
I was going to do the cover letter second, but does this relate to the language that what I'm trying to do is get this language done and then review the cover letter and then go into the cover letter second.
I can wait.
One thing we haven't talked about, which I think we should before we vote, did everyone read sections 2585 to 2594?
Most of it, yes. Yes, and that's why I was going to raise the point I was.
Because that's in B, powers and duties. So we're proposing to amend the duties beyond 2584 to include also 2585 to 2594.
And we're talking about taking on some very substantial responsibility.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want all that responsibility.
Yeah. Well, Becky, let me allow you to finish your thought process, because that's specifically what I want to talk about in the context of how we present it to the town, and simply put, how we present it to the town, and are we presenting it in such a way that we cover our butts properly?
Yeah, so let me give you my point of view on this. My point of view right now is that section 2584, which is all that is called out in the current charter, just in my mind outlines the fact that towns of our size are allowed to have a flood and erosion control board. It doesn't give us any duties or powers at all. Zero.
Right.
I agree.
Correct.
So
yes.
What 2585 to 2594 do is it gives us the authority within limits of appropriation. In other words, we have to go get approval to basically do the work of managing and supervising a flood and erosion control system. It gives us the authorization to propose taking a property. We don't have to, but it gives us the authorization to be able to go to the Board of Selectmen and RTM and propose that. It gives us the authorization to have bonds issued and assessments issued. It gives us the authorization to have the assessments done in a certain way, portioned among the properties. And none of this is anything we have to do, but it gives us the option, in my mind, to do these things if needed to do the work that we feel is necessary from a flood and erosion control standpoint.
Right.
And it lays out a way to do it such that the state has already kind of approved this way of doing it. So it authorizes, how to do late assessment notices and installment payment of assessments and, segregation and use of assessment funds. It basically lays out the way in which we can do it based upon what the state statutes say.
But,
so
Becky, remember, we are private citizens, non-elected officials. We have an informal representation from the town that we're covered by their insurance. But you're talking about some big-time flashpoint issues that very often result in litigation. Example, we as a board make a recommendation that certain property be condemned and taken by the town. Causes values to go way up or way down. Who knows? You still have to go to the town to get their approval.
Correct.
But the mere fact that we have given that recommendation could theoretically give rise to some very substantial financial gain or loss by individuals. Are we fully protected? I have no problem taking on these responsibilities, but I think we need to have language in there that makes it crystal clear that the town is behind us 110%, and we have complete immunity.
So, Peter, would it help then if we went back to Dick's proposed language and in 10.12, Flood and Erosion Control Board, Section B, powers and duties, would you prefer it to say the Flood and Erosion Control Board shall have the powers and duties conferred on flood and erosion control boards generally by 2584, and to make recommendations on sections 2585 to 2594 inclusive of chapter 44, so that we become a recommending body versus a authorizing body? Because at the end of the day, we're only recommending anyway. The Board of Selectmen and presumably RTM are going to have to approve these.
Agreed, but I don't like the word recommendation. I like your idea. 2584 plus the rest.
2584 just lays out what the composition is.
Exactly. And so you say 2584 plus, we will provide guidance to the town in other areas or recommendations or whatever the right words are.
And if it's guidance to the town of sections 2585 to 2594.
Yeah. But does everybody understand my concern? And not everybody is as nice as the group of us are. And when all of a sudden they find there's been a big financial impact because these knuckleheads on the Fair Flood and Erosion Control Board have made a recommendation, a lot of people use that as a knee-jerk reason to file a lawsuit.
So Peter,
Don, Paul, Dick, and Peter will be named defendants.
Yeah, so Peter, I agree with you, but the strategy that I think it's kind of an interesting discussion that we're having, and I think the big question is, are we advisory or are we obviously authoritarian? And the issue that I see is that as we're presenting this, we're asking for the character and the ideology and the legal system to change the character of what the flood and erosion group does. The comment that Dick made earlier is, I don't know what I read it and said this is authoritarian. We're discussing it, and it becomes obvious our choice could be advisory. I almost think to Dick's earliest point, we almost have to submit it and see what comes back. I mean, I think it's a real long shot that they're going to change the character of what we do to the extent that we're currently considering and submitting for. My sense is that this should generate a discussion. And I think the discussion would be healthy. And obviously, if we're put in a position similar to a P&Z board member, the chain to get coverage by the town is almost a third discussion to make sure that we're held harmless. But my view is, I think the concept of what we're talking about is very interesting, and we're trying to fine-tune it. I think we ought to see how it's received and see what sort of discussions are generated from it. And I think we'll get a flavor for what, people are willing to change on our behalf. We're, on one hand, asking for a very reasonable change, and then the other side we're asking for, a pretty significant change in the scope of our work.
All right, let me go back to.
I agree with what you're saying, and I like the advisory authoritarian comparison. I would suggest if we just kind of watch how it goes through the process, that we add maybe one additional phrase like always be in collaboration with and subject to further approvals and funding by the Board of Selectmen or the appropriate town boards or other duly authorized bodies. Just some sort of stuff like that. I think we have to juice it up a little bit, even if we're just going to put it out there to see how it floats.
And I'm personally fine.
Okay, let me make two observations. One is I will read the first sentence of Section 25-84, and I will read it with my personal emphasis. Mm-hmm. Any municipality may, by vote of its legislative body, adopt the provisions of this section and Sections 2585 to 2594 inclusive, and exercise through a flood and erosion control board the powers granted thereunder. So I'm reading that as the municipality may adopt the provisions, and through the flood and erosion control board, they, the municipality, executes the powers granted thereunder.
That's what we're all.
So it's like I read that as we're all in this together.
Well, we're all.
That is a wonderfully idealistic way of looking at it. Right. I don't have that much faith in our judicial system.
I mean, Dick, I think what Peter's saying is probably right. Is there is a chance that the town will get sued and we will be named, the Flood and Erosion Control Board with us named will be part of that suit if we try to do a taking of someone's house and they feel it's unfair.
Yep. But I thought that.
Wait a minute, Dick and Becky. I think the potential for litigation and the naming in any litigation would happen. I think Peter's making this point, and I would emphasize it. We're asking for the possibility of being involved in litigation for much less of an issue than the taking of property. So we could be brought into litigation based on water aggression, based on a theory, based on a policy, based on an organ, based on a project. We could do something on a river that So I think what we're asking for has a much less taking a property always winds up in, or most of the time winds up in some sort of litigation. But I think we're asking for invitation to be included in a greater range. And Becky, I'm not trying to say that was all you were referring to, but I think that's an obvious case. I think there's a much more nuisance possibility that could take place.
And it's just, given that Peter's already confirmed that we are covered under town insurance, the same way any town member would be covered.
Well, that was an oral representation by the town attorney, and if we talk about more than 2584, my suggestion is that we get something more definitive.
And wait a minute, there's nobody talking about the time involved. The hold harmless does not exempt you for spending days, weeks in a courtroom battling a scenario if it goes that far. So, I just think everybody has to be cognizant of the fact that there's more than the potential of a judgment. There's the time involved, and we'd owe the town our time and attention to a matter to the extent that we know information. So I think we all got to get our arms around that as well.
Yeah. But with all of that said, I think I speak for all of us when I say we want to do the right thing. We would like to be involved in all of those different areas on a, quote, advisory, end quote, basis. But how do you word it such that there's not a bullseye on our back? I think, and there must be a way to word it. There must be an arrangement that can be reached with the town to accommodate all this.
I think if we're gonna label ourselves to be in a position of taking a B&B type review position, we've got a bullseye on our back. And I'm not saying not to do it, because I think the reverse of the risk is the fact that we really have both hands and legs tied behind the back. We're not making we're making a difference, but we're looking to try to make a bigger difference in the world of the aggressive water. So you can't make a bigger difference without having more risk. So I think that's kind of what we're all juggling. And I'm for making a more aggressive position if that's what we all decide as a group. I think the way to stay out of trouble is keep things the way they are, because the perception as well as the reality in what I've read sees us more in the advisory capacity, and we don't have any physical responsibility in the direct approval path or denial path of an effort. And the minute we get mixed up into the decision process and bring ourselves into that string of decision making, that's where we take a position of needing the protection financially, but we will always have the obligation to show up when needed in court to defend the case.
Agreed. And let's not forget that we are the voice of all of the elected officials' constituents, and if we're not, we probably shouldn't be on this board. And so if we ultimately get down to some heavy lifting, outgo the petitions and everything else to get something done, not quite as neat and clean, but it's a lot safer.
I mean, and I'm sorry we've gone all around the mulberry bush here, but I'm really fine with, if you guys just want to see what sort of discussion, dynamic discussion we can generate, I think present it. I think the devil's in the details, and that's round two. When you see what they're willing to talk about. I mean, I think changing the members and bringing in alternates will float probably with not a lot of resistance and maybe just some review. But the second part of our call will generate some interesting conversation.
Well, if we're not going to try to be the catalyst to get some real changes made, what do we need more members for?
Well, Dick, I always think we're in there. The problem is we have a limited role. We have a very limited role under the current construct here. So I think that it's limited our ability to make a change, but on the other side, it's kept us safe. But you're never going to officiate significant change without getting into the mud. So I think, look, water's raising every day. We have to do what we have to do, and I think I'm personally fine. Let's let it go, and let's have the conversation. And maybe it goes nowhere, and maybe we have some good conversation, and we tweak it in a way that we feel good about, and don't get everything we're asking for. I think it's all a negotiation and a discussion. And I think at the end of the day, it's, as everyone has said on the call, it's going to be the character of the managers of the town that's going to be reflected in their opinions about what we're forwarding in as a possible suggestion.
Dick, when I hear about all these authorities and the powers you have under there, I'm not sure I want them. To me, the more important thing is if we can get a line item with money, we could do something. To me, the energy should be put into getting money rather than all these other authorities.
But Don, without authority, we won't get the money. And I think it all goes hand in hand. You don't get the money without the responsibility, and the minute you take the responsibility, you're open to criticism and litigation. So it's all one big pile of goo. And my only thing I really am confused about is, as a group, do we want to look to enhance the abilities of the Flood and Erosion Board, or are we going to stay content with what we have, possibly changing the membership structure? Which I think that's the only. And like I said, there hasn't been any motion, but I think we got it. I'm for trying. I'm for, let's get out there and see. Let's mix it up and see what we can do.
Well, here's a backup plan that I think might be interesting. If everyone goes and reads Section 25-85, that is kind of the area that I feel most passionately we need to have some say over and start to shift the town's position in some of these areas. And that specifically speaks to, and I'll just read it out if you don't have it in front of you. Such board shall have authority within limits of appropriation from time to time made by the municipality. In other words, we would go and ask for money. We would request appropriations. We would have the authority to plan, lay out, acquire, construct, reconstruct, repair, maintain, supervise, and manage a flood and erosion control system. So there's weak and flood and erosion control system that goes on to say means any dike, berm, dam, piping, groin, jetty, seawall, embankment, revetment, tide gate, water storage area, ditch, drain, or other structure or facility useful in preventing or ameliorating damage from flood or erosion, whether by fresh or salt water or any dam. So that is a very small part of what this total statutes allows us to have. The other ones are much more aggressive. Those are taking of property and bonding issues and
I have no interest in those.
Stuff like that. Well, I
want to make one other comment. Going back to when I read the first sentence of 25-84, any municipality may, by vote of its legislative body, adopt the provisions of this section, which we've already identified as only let you establish a flood and erosion control board.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And sections 2585 to 2594 inclusive, and exercise through a flood and erosion control board the powers granted thereunder. So if the town does not adopt 2585 to 2594, the town has no authority and power.
I don't read it that way. I read it that if they don't empower a flood and erosion control board to do those duties, the town gets those duties done differently.
And I think I agree with that. I also think that's what they're doing. That's what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, right now they already take care of tide gates are done by the Conservation Commission, and the DPW manages some of the other types of things. So they have already basically taken care of the core flood and erosion control structures, if you will. But there's no one who is planning new ones or doing a long-term plan or doing any long-range visioning for what our town is going to need in 10, 20, 30 years. And that's the miss that I feel we have as a town. No one is thinking big picture about sea level rise in 20 inches and what is it our town, and 15% of our housing stock in a floodplain. And what does our town need to be doing from a long-term standpoint to be protecting against that? And so that's why I want to take on at least 2585, because that gives us the power and duties to plan for all the various, structures.
I agree.
But I'm happy to take on all
85 is the most important.
Yeah. So one thing we might want to do is say that we would like to officially take on 2585 and make recommendations on 2586 through 2594.
To me, 2585 is the important one. The other stuff, taking a property and tax, I have no interest in that at all. I have no expertise.
No, but wait. But one of the things we've been talking about is that in order to do these big projects, we can. Let's see. How do I want to say this?
Well, the Army Corps had
will an elected administration want to raise the taxes on everybody in town equally to provide relief from Mother Nature for the people along the rivers and along the shoreline? The elected officials, when they're running for office, would be in a much better posture to say, we're going to pay for this as a town because it benefits all of us to have this town protected from Mother Nature. However, we are going to prorate the value so that the properties directly benefiting from this, the properties in the floodplain, will pay a larger share than all the other people in town.
Right.
I think that's a good weapon to have, and these other provisions give the town through us the vehicle to do that. I mean, we are not going to sign any orders, purchase orders, cease and desist orders, eminent domain orders. I mean, that's going to be the elected town administration as approved by the elected RTM. That's going to do that. Our name's not going to be on that. So we are advisory people. Well, I mean, I put this together because this is what I think we've been talking about, and I understand Peter's concerned about being personally liable, and that may be so. Peter, you can get a written opinion from the town attorney as to what we're covered for or not covered for. To Paul's point about having to appear in court as a witness and give testimony, well, I mean, we signed up for this as public service, and if that's part of public service, then that's it. If you don't want to subscribe to In for a Penny, In for a Pound, then you should just come to our meetings and make comments from the public audience.
All right, well then let's do it. Let's get it off the ground. Like I said,
okay.
I think it's going to generate discussion, and that to me would be a very healthy next step. And we're not saying we're doing it, we're saying we're proposing it, and we're explaining what we want to do. And I think got to push the envelope to try to get something done. I understand that. And if
it sounds good to me.
If the town agrees with us, then we can worry about how we're insulated as we're putting the process together.
All right, so let us do this then. So I think we are all aligned on everything that is in Dick's proposed draft with the changes that we talked about. Do we want to vote on that and then just quickly review his letter and see if there's any other comments on the letter?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So do I have a motion to approve the draft with the changes as discussed?
I'll make a motion to approve the draft with the changes.
Okay.
I
second. I second.
No problem.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, so that has passed unanimously. So let's just quickly review the letter that Dick put together. Does everyone
Becky,
have that in front of them?
just one last point. Our having voted in favor, subject to our closely monitoring the process as it works its way through the Board of Selectmen or whatever other committee it might be, in order that we may have an opportunity to ourselves edit the ask as appropriate as matters develop. Because I like the idea of letting it run its course and see what happens, but I would like to watch it very carefully and have an opportunity to perhaps edit or amend a bit if things don't go quite right.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think this is going to be, as we talked about, a healthy discussion no matter what. At least the parts of this that are the 25, 85 to 94 part will be. I don't think there'll be much discussion around the increasing the board to 7. So, yes, I do think there will be a discussion. And, yes, Peter, I think, as part of that discussion, we would certainly have the right to, coming out of a discussion, edit our position.
Yes,
Good
I
enough.
agree with that.
Yep. Good.
Thank you, Counselor.
I thought you were going to say subject to us getting confirmation that by adding all these duties, we are still covered under the town insurance, which I would very much like to confirm as well.
Yes, amen.
All right. Are there any comments on the letter?
No.
I have a couple comments. And I think it's more just adding a introductory sentence that captures something to the effect that, in light of the recent state, I don't know what it actually is, state mandate that all municipalities should start to plan for 20 inches of sea level rise by 2020. We feel it is important that the fact that the town of Fairfield has 15% of its housing stock in a floodplain and a riverine sections subject to repetitive flooding. We feel it's important for the Flood and Erosion Control Board at this point in its in the town to take a larger role in setting out a forward plan for the town or with the town to mitigate some of the impact of this future sea level rise and higher storms. Or something to the effect that says there's a reason why we're asking for all this stuff, and it's because all this stuff is going to come down and happen. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
Yes.
Good.
So I think we just need to write a paragraph. I'd just ask us to write a paragraph that does that in a nice, smart way.
I'm looking here. I'm looking at the third paragraph down. Increasing the size of our members from 5 to 7 will give us more resources to call on in furtherance of our duties. Then we can have a sentence about in keeping with Deep's guidance of 2050 by 2050 or whatever that catchphrase is. The sea level rise and the sunny day flooding that we currently see on the peninsula demands that we devise steps to keep Mother Nature at bay. And that needs
yes.
words.
I think that's maybe not quite the exact words I'd use, but yes, I mean, I think that's exactly what I'm saying too. It's somehow.
Well, I mean, okay. So if we're agreeing, I think I agree in principle with that. So Becky, since this is going out over Becky's signature, I mean, she can edit. You can edit whatever you want. So subject to appropriate edits by the chair. We should send this cover letter with the attached language change, with the attached reference statutes.
Okay, so do we have a motion to make that amendment to this letter and then allow me to go ahead and make the changes and send this out?
Let me just mention one other addition that I would make here. Way down the bottom, this request is approved by a unanimous vote of our board on July 21st, 2020, with all 5 members in attendance. So I would like to add with all 5 members in attendance.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, but I just have a quick question. I'm sorry. What is the motion?
I think the motion
the first motion was to approve the language of the proposed changes as amended in conversation, and the second motion is to approve the language of the transmittal document with changes as proposed by Chairman Bunnell.
Okay.
Becky, may I raise one point on the letter?
Yes.
And I'm simply reiterating the point I made before. Fourth paragraph, all actions proposed by FECB would always be subject to further approvals and funding by the appropriate town bodies. I'm fine with that, with the understanding once again that, well, maybe I'm not, because this isn't something for negotiation with the Board of Selectmen. This is our cover letter. I think
yes.
There needs to be further clarification there. And I think I suggested something like, in collaboration with, subject to further approvals and funding by Board of Selectmen or appropriate town boards or other duly authorized bodies. I think this is one where we only get one shot at it. And once again, this will all be subject to discovery. And I'd like to have us covered a little bit better than just appropriate town bodies. But maybe for purposes of going to the Board of Selectmen, it doesn't matter. I can go with the flow on it, but I would juice it up a little bit.
Okay. Do you want to? We can agree to change that sentence if you want to provide language that you feel better protects us, and just send that to me after this meeting. That would be fine.
I'll send you something. Yeah, and maybe in the context of a cover letter, it's better to do it Dick's way because it's just a cover letter. But
well, I'm sitting here listening to you try try and include a codicil in a contract or something. And this is not a contract. This is just hey guys, we want to do this stuff. We want to get more members because we hope we can do more than we've been doing.
Dick, allow me to be very rude. I have been in more environmental litigation than I care to remember, and probably 25% of it ends up being criminal, where good people who did the right thing end up being prosecuted criminally for all the wrong reasons. And it's beachfront owners, it's fishermen, it's people that want to bring their boats into different areas. They didn't dot the I's, they didn't cross the T's, and all the regulations in Washington, in Hartford, many of them have strict liability provisions that provide for people going to jail. And call me a coward if you want, but I don't mind saying I have been a defendant in more than one of those actions and at risk of going to jail, and I didn't do a thing wrong. And so I've got it tattooed up one arm, down the other. Protect yourself, protect yourself, protect yourself, protect yourself. And I forgive me for running on like this. Yes. Codicil? Yes. Because I've seen too many people get badly hurt picking up legal fees that wipe them out. I just don't. I have to be honest with you, but I am more than willing to go along with the process that Paul suggested of let's see how it goes, let's see what the feedback is, but let's stay on our toes because this is pretty nasty stuff when people get angry. And forgive me for the outburst. You have to know where I'm coming from.
No, that's fine. And I mean, I don't even want to testify in court, let alone look at going to jail and stuff. I go back to you can certainly feel, and I mean we can vote authorization or whatever, but you should feel free to go back to the town attorney and share these concerns with him. Share how we're thinking of this, because this is in a day or two. This is not going to be a secret. It's going to be out there to the Board of Selectmen, and just get his written assurances of what defending members of the Flood and Erosion Control Board really means in the real world.
Dick, I think that is a great idea, and with the board's approval, I'm delighted to do that. What does anybody else think about that? Get something in writing.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Paul, do you think that's overreaction? Should we sit and wait before we do that?
Paul went to sleep.
I guess so.
Yeah, can't say I blame him.
Yeah.
Why don't I have a subject to anybody's disagreeing? Why don't I go and have a slightly ramped up call with the town attorney and ask what we can get in writing, and then we see what we get and we decide if we want more.
Sure.
I don't want to chase them off.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want them to shut down our board.
That sounds good to me.
Is that all right, Becky?
Let me just, for clarity, just so I understand. So we're still proposing to approve this letter and this proposed revision to the charter today.
Yes.
We are just saying that we won't send it until you have had a conversation with the town attorney confirming that we are covered under for any lawsuit? What exactly are you getting from the town attorney? That's, I guess, what I'm asking. You're asking him to put in writing that a flood and erosion control board is covered under the insurance of the town for any litigation.
Becky, you asked the right question, and the answer is he is not going to be able to give us the sleep easy that we're looking for. He'll give us half a loaf. It's just not the way the law works. Ask Joe Michelangelo about it.
So what are you proposing? I guess I'm confused. So what exactly is the next step that you're proposing, and what will you get out of it?
I would like to have the town attorney send us something in writing telling us the protections that we have. Maybe that's the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen the town policy. For all I know, the town policy says that unless you're an elected or salaried elected official or salaried employee, you're not covered.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
I mean, you see stuff like that all the time. I don't know what it's. He just said to me orally, "Oh, don't worry, you're covered." So I'm assuming.
No argument. No argument. You're right. Trust but verify.
So you're asking for the written policy that covers nominated boards.
I doubt he will give us the policy, and I'm not suggesting we ask for the policy. I'm suggesting that as a starting point, we ask if the town will hold harmless, indemnify, and defend the FECB members for any actions undertaken on behalf of the town. And if he says yes, that's a home run. But if he's smart, he's going to come back and say, well, as long as you don't do anything really bad. But let's see what he comes back with in writing.
Right. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
But now I'm hearing Peter suggest that course of action as a parallel path, not to wait until he gets some response before we submit this proposed change.
No,
is that true?
It makes no difference. On that point, I think Paul put it very well. This process is not going to happen the same day we send it. Let's just let me see if I can get something from the town attorney over the next week, and then I'll circulate it. And then in the meantime, send everything out.
Yeah, start the process. Yes.
I'm a good coward. I can always retreat.
All right. So so I think we have a proposal on the table. I think we have voted on both of these. Is that correct, Prue?
No,
we did not vote on the letter.
On the cover letter.
Okay.
Right.
So can I get a motion to make the changes as discussed to the cover letter, and then agree that we will send both of these out?
Okay, I make the motion.
Can I have a second?
I second it.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so that is passed as well.
I
so
would one other suggestion. I think Becky and I will work on adding these changes into the draft transmittal letter, but I would like to just send it out for everyone's final, yep, that's what we talked about.
Sure, sounds good.
Becky, do you still want that? Do you still want that language that I suggested, or are we just going to go with what we have and
honestly,
see
that's
what we get from the town?
I'll let that be your call. I'm happy to add the language if you want, if you feel it's better added, or if you want to just let it go as is because it's just a cover letter. I'm fine either way.
It's always better to have it. You will have it from me tonight.
Okay.
If it sounds like a lot of gibberish, for the record, I have no problem with you not putting it in there, subject to further discussions, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Good. Thank you for that. So let us move on because we are getting we're getting towards the end of our time. I mean, we've been almost an hour and a half. The next item on call is a review of proposed amendments to the zoning regulations, and this is something that has come in front of planning and zoning. It is section 2.12, flood protection, and 32, flood management. And Dick is proposing one change. I'd like to kind of give some background to the group. Dick and I both attended the planning and zoning meeting where this was first brought up.
We'll start, but Becky, I would suggest, why don't you start? We did have a conversation with Emmeline prior to that.
Yes, she had actually given us a little heads up, which was nice, for, in terms of what changes they were proposing to make. And basically what
we just wait. I just want to set the stage right. We called her. We saw this item
we called her. This was the first planning and zoning meeting. We called her.
Yeah,
but then the
June 23rd.
But the second one, she sent us to change it. But anyway, I want to back up even further than that. So just to give people context, the planning and zoning changes were initially started because of some changes to the FEMA regulations as it relates to our FEMA town rating. And they're changing some of the language that would allow us, that if we didn't make those same changes, would mean that we would drop from a 8 rating to a 9 rating or something. And that would be an impact to the town that everyone would pay a little bit more in flood insurance. So in order to protect our town rating, we wanted to adopt the FEMA language that they are requesting be put into zoning regulations that will then allow us to keep our rating. So that was the impetus for this change. They also made some other changes that were what I would call kind of helpful changes based on irregularities that their inspectors are seeing in the field. So, for example, you are not allowed to go to a elevated house after the fact and create a livable room underneath your house after you've gotten your C of O. You're not allowed to sort of do that. And yet they're seeing that many, many times. So they put some other changes in that they felt would mitigate against people choosing to try to pull this kind of fast one and do these things after the fact that they know they're not really supposed to do, but they're doing anyway because their inspectors are seeing it on a regular basis. So the impetus for these zoning changes had two things. One was the FEMA regulation changes that would allow us to keep our flood rating, and the second one was inspector-driven changes that would mitigate against people after the fact doing things that they shouldn't be doing. All right, so that's the background. The proposal that Dick is putting in place deals with, I think, one of those. Dick, I don't know if you want to walk through your proposal.
Yeah, and after I sent that at the 11th hour, I realized I did not include this whole see-through thing, where the 50% see-through has changed to 40% in Wentz subsequent adjustment. So they introduced this idea of an AE zone that is within the limit of moderate wave action, this LIMWA, this concept of LIMWA. So this concept of LIMWA is what we have to include in our regulations so that the community rating system will still continue to say, yep, they're doing the right thing. And it also, the other thing, these changes bring our regulations in line with the current Connecticut building code. So that's all well and good, and I support that. Our board certainly supports the community rating system, but where they are limiting the enclosed area to 299 square feet in an AE zone that's not a LIMWA zone, just a regular AE zone, I think that's capricious and arbitrary. Why are they? And their language is really poor. If you read through the stuff I sent a while back, their language is really poor because they make this change and they contradict themselves right in the same article, which is like you really shouldn't do that. You should read for continuity. So I disagree with that, and I think it's very appropriate in a LIMWA zone to let the water come through, because after all, the objective of FEMA is to protect the structure. And in an AE zone that's not a LIMWA zone, you have the water rising slowly. If you have the flood venting in accordance with the FEMA requirements, recommendations, if you have the flood venting, which is covered in our flood zone regulations, then the hydrostatic pressure is equalized and you're not compromising the foundation of the house.
Right.
But they want everything to be open, and then the other obnoxious thing is they want 50% see-through. And they changed that to 40%. I don't understand why that changed, but that's now down to 40% in their current thinking. So I don't know. I mean, you saw Becky's comment to them, and she brought in the thing about the flood wall, the flood wall protection on the creek side of the peninsula, and the concrete.
I asked for a change that we not allow people to reduce their grade in the flood zone.
Right, the grade thing.
Which they refused to deal with either of those two. They felt that was not the purview of zoning.
Right.
And I kind of pushed back and said, if that's not the purview of zoning, whose purview is that?
And they said, talk to engineering.
Yeah.
So. But my other thing, Becky, is that I'm given their representation that the reason for doing this is to keep our CRS rating. My approach here is to just comment on that as respecting the CRS rating, saying, yeah, this is all well and good for CRS, except you don't need to limit the enclosed space in an AE non-LIMWA zone, and this 40% visibility is an artificial requirement that is not supported by FEMA's guidelines for open construction, because they allow louvers. You can have the angle of the louver such that you cannot see directly through, but it still gives you the 40% open space. So,
Dick, I think that what would make this a stronger letter, in my view, is to actually cite the FEMA regulations for the AE zone and specifically call out the language that they use and use that to make the point that we are arbitrarily making it worse for our residents by forcing our residents to comply to a higher standard than what FEMA requires per the new guidelines. And I think you should do it with guideline language.
Are you talking about the peekaboo see-through or just the 299 square feet?
Both, because I don't think either one of those are in the AE zone for FEMA, are they?
I have to do some looking around.
Because I think it would be stronger if we could show that FEMA is not requiring either one of those two.
I understand.
Because my understanding was that they were doing this because it was easier for them as inspectors.
Yeah, in our conversations, and also if you guys go and listen to the recording of the meeting, you'll hear Emmeline allows us how the peekaboo thing is put in there for the convenience of their staff, because as their staff goes around to assure people are in zoning compliance, or somebody drops a dime on the neighbor they hate and say, hey, my neighbor Lucy built the whole friggin' kitchen down in her grade level. Well, they can't see through the lattice or through the louvers or through the enclosure whether Lucy did build a kitchen or not. And then the other thing is that after the fact, after Lucy gets the CO, after the fact, they have to issue a cease and desist order, and Lucy can take them to court, and they have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops after the fact. That makes it really burdensome for them to enforce the zoning regulations. And I can understand that, but the place to satisfy that is not by putting a burden on, as I said, I think I said here, putting a burden on the 98% of people who abide by the regulations. So they're just onerous.
Yeah, I agree with you in principle, Dick. I just feel like the way you've crafted it here is not strong enough. I think it needs to go back and reference the FEMA guidelines and then reference what the town is trying to do, and then make the point that we are putting an undue burden on our residents for the convenience of some inspectors because a few people have tried to skirt the guidelines. And I feel like the way you just said it verbally was much stronger than the way you've written it in your letter. So that's just my point of view.
Yeah, well, I'm also trying not to really piss off Matt and Joe and Emmeline. Because they do. Admittedly, they do have a hard job, but this is
my personal preference would be to put a fine. I don't know why we can't. There's no fines right now. If you don't follow the zoning guidelines, there's no fines. Were you aware of that? There's no way to fine a homeowner if they deliberately do
not until you mentioned it. But now that you.
So I would actually think we would.
Would that have to be in the zoning regulations about fines?
I
would think it would have to. The regulation would have to set the stage for fines, and then, as from time to time, the amount of which, as from time to time, determined by the staff.
Yeah, I don't see why. Wouldn't that be a bigger deterrent if you knew you were going to get $1,000 fine if you put a livable space into your house? Guess what?
Yeah. Okay. The other thing, just in fairness, the other thing that Emmeline was saying was that people are taking advantage in the AE zone of raising their house higher than they really need to do for compliance with the base flood elevation in order to park the cars underneath, and then they enclose it so they get another whole level of storage, usefulness, if you will, where the intent, and this goes to the stories, because if you have an open ground level, then that doesn't, and I'm not conversant with this, so this might be wrong, but this is my interpretation. That open ground level does not count as a story. So you can then go and put 2.5 stories on top of that. So with the new houses that are being built, basically you have 3.5 stories. You have your ground level area, then you have your first occupied level, which is, your kitchen, family room, living room, whatever. And then you have your second occupied story, which is typically the bedrooms. And then you have your half story, which is typically a little extra bonus room, party room, lookout room with a deck looking out at the water, whatever. So there is that consideration. So then if you have it truly open to where you can't store anything but in your 299 square feet, that might dissuade people from building that high, and it might make them have a more reasonable sized structure. But there's there's a whole thing about stories in an A zone or a B zone to address that. So I don't know.
But I
it
think
just
to
seems,
your point you
seems
made,
onerous.
I don't think they're building it higher to store stuff, because you can store stuff if it's only 6 feet high or 5 feet high. They're building it higher so they can get their cars out under, and they're happening to then take that space and say, hey, I can store stuff. But the impetus is not to store stuff. The impetus is to get cars under. I believe from everything I've seen.
I agree with that.
You can still store stuff under 5 feet on a 5 feet.
Yeah, but it's a lot better. It's a lot better to be able to walk around your storage area. So so you have it 6.5 feet high, 7 feet high. I guess what do you need for a car? Like 7.5 feet is plenty for a car. Even 7 feet's enough for most cars.
Mm-hmm. Yes, most cars.
Well, you need 8 if you want a garage door opener. If you want an automatic door opener, you need 8. Anyway, my proposal, I would propose that if we want to send this out under the board, we do just a little bit more due diligence and reference the FEMA.
Okay, let me work on that. And Becky, I will play it off of you initially. The thing is that, I mean, we don't have to comment on this as a board, but the next meeting, because then this was tabled at the 7/14 meeting, whatever it was. So the next time this topic is going to be before Planning and Zoning is September 15th. And September 15th is the third Tuesday. It is probably the same day as our meeting, because we have our meetings on the Tuesday. I didn't look, but
we have our August meeting between now and then.
There you go. Okay. I'm sorry. Right. Forget it. I will have something. I'll talk with Becky and work with her, and I'll have something for the August meeting. Thank you, Becky. I was losing a month.
All right. So I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, which is any other old or new business.
I think we've covered a lot tonight.
Then if I'm not
hearing
nothing. Any old or new, then I would like to propose that we adjourn the meeting. And
I second that motion.
Okay.
No, we don't really need to vote on that. The chairman decides when we close the meeting.
I'm just going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you
very
much,
good.
everyone.
Okay, thank you all.
Coming.
Thank you very
much. We were able to get
Thank you.
minutes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.